Would you like to try some of my homemade burgers? I was a little startled. I didn't really feel comfortable eating his food. I mean, I've only known him for 45 minutes. I had promised to take a look at this house because I desperately needed a cheap place to sleep. I still haven't made up my mind yet, so I didn't want to take too many liberties from him. Maybe later, Mr. Belvedere. Mr. Belvedere flashed his confident smile. His eyes gleamed at me. That's fine, my dear, but you have to try at least one piece before you go. Upon meeting him at the subway station, Mr. Belvedere had reminded me to eat his meat upon the first 5 minutes of meeting me. And now he's asking again, just as I was taking off my shoes and he was guiding me into the long hallway of this house. The inside of the house looked just as I had expected. Old, a little dusty, and at this time of night, almost 10 o'clock p.m., was tired and worn looking, emphasized by the yellow tint of the light bulb. With the wooden staircase at the entrance, leading to a dark upper level, and the numerous religious photos that hung on the walls, looking a little crooked to the side. Did I mention that this used to be a church? The place where you'll be sleeping used to be a storage room. I renovated the whole thing after I stopped being a pastor. Yeah. I remember the online ad with the exceptionally low rent. Spacious one room with air conditioning, accompanying kitchen, free Wi-Fi, and other utilities. It didn't say at the back of a church, not what I was expecting. Now on to the kitchen. Those other guys that used to live here was always in the kitchen. I hide here quite a bit as well. Sometimes I'd spend hours just grinding up meat here. Also, laundry is done here as well. Sometimes I do laundry for the young people here. Depends if I'm in a good mood. Well, at least this place has a kitchen. I honestly haven't had home food in the past 3 weeks. Needless to say, I was gonna spend a lot of time making food for myself. Especially if I don't get a teaching job soon. It's nice to have someone that speaks English. The last fluent English conversation I had was with Jimmy Abrams, 18-year-old boy. Nice boy, but one day he disappeared. Probably went back to England. England, eh? I acknowledged Mr. Belvedere with a smile. So I guess I wasn't the only young boy to run away from the third world capitalist society to teach English in a foreign world. You said you wanted to find a job, right? I nodded. And no luck these past few weeks? I nodded. I know everyone in this neighborhood. I can probably help you find something. Private tutor, daycare, anything. He flashed his smile again. Well, the truth was, Mr. Belvedere seemed like a social butterfly. When he picked me up at the train station to walk over here, he greeted most people along the way. They didn't seem to care that Mr. Belvedere was obviously a foreigner. Mr. Belvedere was charming, and pretty handsome too. His chiseled features matched with curly brown hair, and just the right amount of lines on his face could tell you. He's been through a lot. This is the bathroom. He switched on the bathroom light directly across from the kitchen area. The fluorescent white light highlighted the old and broken down features of the bathroom. Dark stains were imprinted on the sides of the bathtub and sinks in huge gashes. The toilet was covered in lines of yellow stains that ran from the seat all the way down to the bottom. Now I'm gonna be using my own bathtub upstairs, and this one at the bottom is usually reserved for you guys. Of course, at the moment we only have a couple of people using it, yourself and 2 other girls. Well, that was weird. It was almost past 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night with light of rain. Why weren't the girls home? Still, I didn't think too much of it. Whatever kind of young person who lives in a church in the rural outskirts of town populated by mostly retired people and an ex-pastor probably wasn't the people who like to plan ahead. They were probably like me and 18-year-old Jimmy Abrams, young, in debt. Maybe this old church run by Mr. Belvedere was like a youth hostel for young runaways who wanted to rebel from mom and dad. Now for the living room. The living room was a huge size, filled with a variety of framed vintage photographs, most of them grainy like they were from the 70s. I even saw a young Mr. Belvedere, looking exact with the same smile, except with a long curly afro-like brown hairstyle. He was in photographs with many attractive young guys and girls. The house looked lively. It looked as if this house was once a very happy and very popular place. And in the center of all the photographs, situated above the central television set, was a black and white studio shot photograph of a beautiful young woman carrying a child of about 5 or 6 years old. This photo looked even older. Probably looked like it could have been from the early 60s. That's my mom. She was my only family. My father left us when I was very young, so we moved here from the States in the 70s hoping for a better life. My dad was very rich, so much that we had enough to buy this church with his money. She passed away 10 years ago. Her health was never the greatest. That's when I decided to close down the church. So most of your area is this first level. The upstairs is where I live, so it's basically off limits to you guys. Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Belvedere lost his smile, replacing it with an intense expression. I chuckled at his sudden seriousness. You may never go into the basement. One of the girls a couple of years ago went in there this one time. I caught her and she denied it. I ended up having to correct her. I was startled and honestly was never going to go into the basement anyways, but I nodded sincerely to please Mr. Belvedere. Mr. Belvedere, I will really consider your offer. The price really is the best I've seen yet. Would you show me to my bedroom? I grinned. Mr. Belvedere hesitated for half a second before displaying his once again usual smile. Oh, it's being painted. And yes, my dear, please respond as soon as possible. As you know, my place is very popular, especially with you young people. Yes, of course. Oh, and Mr. Belvedere ran into the kitchen and pulled a burger from the oven. He took 2 pieces of bread and put the burger inside them and handed it over to me. I've been warming it since this afternoon. The meat, I had just finished churning it just the night before. Fresh. You can take it on your way home. Anyways, it's raining outside. I'll give you an umbrella. You can give it to me the next time we meet. Mr. Belvedere handed me a dark green umbrella with an ancient wooden handle. I took the umbrella and left for the door. It would take me 15 minutes to get back to the station. Mr. Belvedere waved goodbye to me at his front door, and I walked away from that old church. As I approached the station, I withdrew the umbrella only to find the initials J.A. on the handle. This must have belonged to Jimmy Abrams. Noted. I'll return it the next time. 3 days after that, my mother had a stroke. She's had similar episodes before, but this time it was more serious and she had to be hospitalized. I flew back to the States immediately, taking back whatever was left of my savings. For the next few weeks, Mr. Belvedere had continued to email me. What do you think? It's a very popular place. If you come up with a decision, please contact me ASAP. I need a response. The emails progressively became more and more disturbing. I can track your IP address. I know the hotel you live at is a 35-minute train ride from my house. With my whole mom incident, I didn't want to deal with the emails and eventually blocked the emails completely. And in time, I had forgotten about the whole trip completely. It's been 2 years since meeting Mr. Belvedere, and I had ended my phase to travel and explore the world. I was now working at a call center at a bank full time. It wasn't until last week when I saw in the news that a man from Texas, USA had been arrested in Japan for the disappearance of dozens of teenagers, and on the list there was a certain young man called Jimmy Abrams. I looked closer at the man they arrested, Mr. Belvedere. He supposedly killed 89 victims in the past 10 years. Apparently, Mr. Belvedere would first murder the teens in their first week of living at the church. Then he'd carry them to the bathroom that he showed me and decapitate them, remove their limbs, and then drain all their blood from their bodies. Then Mr. Belvedere would grind them up in his meat grinder in the kitchen and then keep their remains inside the basement, along with the bones of his mother. Afterwards, he'd use the meat to cook his homemade hamburgers. The worst part of the story was sometimes it would take a whole week to grind up one body. So Mr. Belvedere would simply leave the body in the upstairs bedroom of the tenants, or the old storage room, as he called it. Sometimes the flesh would rot and become infested with insects. I later tried to find Jimmy Abrams' umbrella. I wanted to burn it, but I couldn't find it. Still, I didn't tell anyone about this story. This account is the only account I've ever made of it. Even till this day, I can sometimes dream of walking through that old church house with Mr. Belvedere's charming smile in the background and the taste of delicious Belvedere's burger in my mouth.